Now, Nigel Farage has, over the last 24 hours, faced the utmost opprobrium for his remarks yesterday about the British Muslim community, speaking in an interview with Trevor Phillips.
About Muslims here?
We are. And I'm afraid I found some of the recent surveys saying that 46% of British Muslims support Hamas, support a terrorist organisation that is prescribed in this country.
Well, Trevor Phillips said that these were incendiary remarks and went on to say this.
You talk about Muslims as hostile to British values.
No,
I've got to say, I don't really. Let me finish what I'm going to say. I don't really see how you arrive at that conclusion.
Well, this interview has been seen by millions of people, with many claiming Nigel Farage is racist because of it. But let's drill down to some of the facts, because Nigel's claims that alarming numbers of British Muslims hold beliefs that are contrary to British values are seemingly supported by some evidence. The great irony of this is that we don't need to look much further than Trevor Phillips' own research with Channel 4 from just a few years ago. Well, Trevor Phillips' own data with Channel 4 revealed that only 34% of British Muslims would inform the police if they thought somebody they knew was getting involved with people who supported terrorism in Syria. 52% did not believe that homosexuality should be legal in Britain. 23% supported the introduction of Sharia law. 32% refused to condemn those who take part in violence against those who mock the Prophet Muhammad. And 39% agreed that wives should always obey their husbands. Well, Mr. Phillips, a former chair of the Equality and Human Rights Commission, even went as far as to say that some British Muslims represented a nation within a nation, promoting his suspension from the Labour Party. It seems, if anything, it's Trevor Phillips and his research who at least used to take a firmer view on British Muslims than Nigel Farage does now. So how on earth have we found ourselves in a situation in which Phillips is accusing Farage of being offensive for making exactly the same type of claim that he did just a few years ago? Well, I'm delighted to be joined now by the Imam and broadcaster Ajmal Masroor. Ajmal, thank you so much for making the time for us this evening, because I think there's two different points here. Number one, the idea that all British Muslims are antithetical to British values, I think, is plainly wrong and isn't borne out by data. But the claim that a significant proportion of British Muslims do hold views that are contrary to what most people would describe as British values, well, that seems to stack up to evidence.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and good evening to you and your viewers. On this glorious day, we've had a fantastic weather outside. What a discussion to have at the end of the day about our values. What defines us as unique and British? It's our acceptance of people who are different. It's about our multicultural country in which we can go to any high street and find any cuisine, any culture that we want, and we celebrate it. It's about our neighbors who are very different to us, but we embrace them. It's about our open arms to people who are in trouble around the world. It's about us standing for justice and fairness and equality across the globe. These are British values, by the way. It is about us promoting justice.
They are British values, Ajmal, but I suppose the big question is, to what extent does tolerance extend to being tolerant of intolerance? For example, 52% of British Muslims saying that homosexuality should be illegal. Should we be tolerant of that view?
Let me just finish my sentence. So if the paramount feature of Britain is about justice, fairness, and rule of law, did you know the most important feature of Islam is justice? In fact, it's more paramount to be just, to be godly. You can't be godly without being just. And that's why I've said many times before, if you do a Google search, you'll find on Sky itself, I did a TV program where I said Britain is more Islamic than most Muslim countries. Here, when I say Islamic, I mean there is rule of law, freedom, justice, acceptance, diversity, education, opportunities. These are Islamic values, and these are British values. So for anyone to suggest that British Muslims are in any way, shape, or form opposed to these sacred and universal values that are so British, I think that's really strange, because I don't recognize any of those accusations. I, for one, say to everybody, Britain is more Islamic than most Muslim countries. You name me a better Muslim country in the world, Even Saudi Arabia will not, unfortunately, will not measure when I measure the Islamic values and British values.
And yet, when you look at, for example, how many mosques operate in the United Kingdom, there are some that are funded by Iran, of course, some that take a more Wahhabist view, those that come through Saudi Arabia funding as well. There are lots of different groups within the Muslim community, and I think it's completely right to promote and highlight the number of Muslims who hold that view that you seem to espouse there, that there should be sort of tolerance and peace. But of course, there does seem to be a particular problem within Islam of a certain radicalism that doesn't exist within some other religions. Perhaps it did centuries ago, and that radicalism has sort of been reformed out of the mainstream of Christianity or Judaism. But there is a problem with radicalism within Islam.
Well, you've got to have to be fair with your assessment. How many mosques do you know? How many mosques have you visited? I have established a mosque myself only recently. We funded the mosque £6.65 million from our local congregation. Not a single penny from outside. 99% or more of the British mosques are built by the hard-earned cash, hard-earned money and wealth of British Muslims. To suggest that these have been built or funded by foreign countries in itself is not true, number one. Number two, one or two mosques that have been funded by countries such as Saudi Arabia. Well, we are in good terms with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is our friend. We buy oil from them. We sell them weapons. I don't like Saudi Arabia, but some of the British government do. So we can't have it both ways. If we're going to be buying oil from Saudi Arabia, and if we're going to be selling weapons from Saudi Arabia, surely Saudi funding should be welcomed when it comes to our mosques. Why are we having a problem with Saudi funding?
I do want to drill down in our... We don't have long left, Ajmal. Let me ask you one more question.
One more point before...
Let me ask you one more question, just to finish on. You seem to be suggesting that there isn't a problem within the British Muslim community. Is that actually what you're saying? Or do you accept that there is a particular problem of radicalism within this community?
I believe the problem in our society is universal and it transcends religion. We have, in our country, crime going through the roof. Youth are being killed. One of my friend, Imam, a Muslim cleric, was stabbed to death. He wasn't stabbed to death because he's an Imam. He just happens to be walking by the street. Now, knife crime, gang crime, drugs, education failure, NHS crumbling. These are universal problems everyone is facing. So to single out Muslim community and to say there is a problem with the Muslims is actually you're being not honest and genuine about it. And finally, look, there is a problem that you are missing. Many religious values or many people from various religions may take an extremist view, such as in America. We've got evangelical Christians or even those who call for the destruction of the Palestinians in Israel.
People would
These
think
would be
it
all
would be
extreme, right?
A little
And
disingenuous to deny that there is a particularly more radical problem in recent years within Islam, that there is this view of Islamism as a proportion of those that follow Islam that does seem to be more violent at the moment. If we were talking 30 or 40 years ago, we could talk about the IRA till the cows come home. But clearly, I think there is a deeper problem that perhaps we're skirting over there. But Ajmal Mansour, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. But thank you very much for coming on. Really appreciate it.